Hello everyone, welcome to my Evil Within 2, Akumu difficulty, no upgrade / keys walkthrough, and this is chapter 4, Behind the Curtain. And we're currently trekking across Union in order to get to a safe house that will allow us access to the Marrows, and we're going to be coming across a pretty big combat encounter coming up, which is the very first mandatory combat encounter of the game. And it's a very simple combat encounter, and there's actually an exploit you can do to make that section way easier than it perhaps should be. I don't use it in this walkthrough because it's just very stupid, and it just completely takes away the challenge of the whole entire encounter. It's the same case with Resident Evil 4 in the very first village sequence, where everyone, all they do is just shoot a hole through a door and just knife the enemies as they try to get to the door. And I think that's just very disrespectful to the developers, because you're not getting your hands dirty, you're not enjoying the challenge of it, you're not enjoying just how fast and frenetic those encounters can feel like. And this encounter here, while it's not as frenetic as the village sequence, it's still pretty challenging. I know Serpent 17 struggled with the sequence, but it wasn't that bad. As long as you have the shotgun, as long as you have the axe, and as long as you know when to kill certain enemies and when not to kill certain enemies, you'll be fine. Right here, the spawns in Union have changed since you did the warehouse sequence, so there are going to be spawn all around this area, and there are also going to be hysterics and other enemies in different areas, so you've got to make sure you're taking the correct path when it comes to getting to the safe house. I don't think I should have taken the path that I took. I should have just gone on this street over here. I should have just gone to the left from O'Neill's safe house and just taken this street, because there's really no threat here. The only threat that you have to worry about is near the safe house, because there is a new enemy type guarding that safe house now, and it is called a Lament. And the Lament is one of the most dangerous enemies in this game, and it's highly recommended that you do stealth kills on this enemy. This enemy takes 2 sneak kills to be killed, just like the Hysteric. You can also use the sniper rifle and headshot this enemy in order to kill it as well, which is exactly how a sniper rifle is supposed to feel. So this game does not abandon feedback whatsoever, which is really good. But I just choose to use the bottle here just to get her away. If you listen right now, the sound she's making indicates she's running, so you gotta bear that in mind just in case you're unaware if she spotted you or not. Your HUD will also show up as well, just indicate that you might have been spotted. It's some pretty helpful feedback on the game's part. But a couple of things to bear in mind with the Lament: when it spots you, it will scream, and it will drain your stamina. And you're gonna have to make sure you break line of sight with the Lament in order to stop her from chasing you. And also, she has the ability to fire acid at you. The acid by itself is not that much of a problem because it doesn't have a lot of range, but when she's paired with other enemies and they're putting pressure on you, it's very easy to get hit by the acid. And also, she has a grab move that will instantly kill you. It's also an homage to Resident Evil 4, because the death animation that plays when she vomits all over Sebastian as her grab animation, it melts his face, and the way his face looks in the aftermath of that attack looks exactly the same as in Leon's case. In Leon's case, whenever he was grabbed by an Invisador and it killed him by vomiting on him, his face was melted. One of his eyeballs was protruding out of his head so much, and the other half of his face, a lot of skin was missing. And it looks almost the same case with Sebastian. And I find it very funny how this game makes a lot more homages to Resident Evil 4 than the first game, considering that the first game was developed by Shinji Mikami, the guy who made Resident Evil 4. Yet, The Evil Within 2 was made by John Johannes, and apparently John Johannes cared a lot more about Resident Evil 4 than Shinji Mikami did when it came to homages. I found that very funny when I was thinking about that. I mean, Shinji Mikami did make homages, but he mainly made homages to Resident Evil 1. Because in the beginning of Chapter 2, when you got the lantern and you saw Connolly munching on a corpse, the way the scene plays out is exactly the same as in Resident Evil 1 when you saw your very first zombie, where the zombie was munching on the corpse. It took the head of the dead body off, and then it turned to look at you. And it was the exact same case in The Evil Within, only it was way scarier in The Evil Within because it was more modernized and it had a better atmosphere in my opinion. And then the next homage to Resident Evil 1 was in Chapter 9, because in Chapter 9, Sebastian makes a quote about Rubik's Mansion where he says that he's likely been here before, like he had this feeling that he had been here before, and he was making a subtle hint to Resident Evil 1, and the mansion looked almost exactly like Resident Evil 1's mansion, and the interior definitely gave up some Resident Evil 1 vibes. And I guess Shinji Mikami made more homages to Resident Evil 1 because at the time, a lot of people were demanding a good survival horror game, since survival horrors seemed to be deteriorating. And I think as a response to the fans, Shinji Mikami thought it was best to do an homage to Resident Evil 1, considering it's the very first survival horror game, just to remind them that survival horror is not finished. And that was definitely the case, because The Evil Within 1 is a fantastic survival horror game, and if you haven't played it, I highly recommend you do, because it's honestly one of the best games ever made. That's my opinion on it. It's such a shame it didn't get that kind of title, because the people reviewing that game were expecting old school survival horror, and old school survival horror is outdated, and it doesn't do survival horror that well. It's not modernized properly, and it's just very lazy horror, because it relies far too much on smoke and mirrors rather than actual visceral gameplay. And not only that, but a lot of people had a lot of trouble adjusting to the gameplay on The Evil Within 1. I don't see how. The gameplay on The Evil Within 1 is so easy to adjust to, and look at that just then! How on earth did my shotgun shell miss? That's some Evil Within 1 garbage right there with the random variable on the reticle. Only on the Evil Within 1, the random variable on the reticle was only apparent with the pistols and the magnum, never with the other weapons. But make sure you clear out most of the enemies in this area, especially the ones directly above you, because the safest place to be is at the top of the ladder, and the enemies are only able to get to you from that ladder. And something else you need to note, the game is going to give you a prompt to hold square, and when that prompt shows up, Sebastian does a particular animation when it happens. Like, watch. Do you see that? Do you see how Sebastian kind of moved for a little bit when he was on the ladder? Well, if you're in the animation of getting off the ladder, when you get to the top of that ladder, Sebastian will not climb up the ladder properly, and he'll get put into a different position. And I have no idea why this kind of jank exists in this game. And one of the main areas where the jank is most apparent is with mantling. Mantling, I had no issues with in the Evil Within 1, but with the way the mantling animations work now in this game, I get a lot of weird moments where Sebastian does a lot of weird things. Like, you might have seen it at the beginning of Chapter 3 in my walkthrough, where I mantled onto a car, and there was a crate in the way, and when I did that, Sebastian ended up being stuck in a falling animation for a little bit. And there are equally janky moments like that with mantling on this game, and I have no idea why. But I managed to clear out all but one enemy. The last enemy is a hysteric in this encounter. The shotgun and the axe are really powerful here, and even though I did use a lot of shotgun shells, I'm going to be able to get them back, because I know I'm going to be able to get shotgun shells back from crates later on, and also from the boss fight with Stefano. And I don't really need the shotgun for a lot of other situations. And most of the other situations I can just handle with my other weapons. It's the same case with the Evil Within 1. The games are pretty flexible with allowing you to use different weapons for each situation. And the fact that they let you craft different types of ammunition for the weapons is really beneficial for the experimentation aspect of this game. But that encounter is done now, and that hysteric that's currently active will despawn when I progress further on in this room. And I think she only despawns when you drop the walkway, and the only way to get to the walkway is to pull this lever here, and then head down, and there's going to be two lost just lying on the ground, but I'm going to be able to sneak kill one of them, and I'm going to be able to use the bottle on the other one. Because I'm in an interior environment, I know that this lost is not going to do the very fast sprint animation. However, in the first person mode, for some reason, the lost can choose to sprint very fast. It's one of the odd parts of the mode. There are times where the enemies can do the very fast sprint animation in areas that they've never done it before. So, you gotta be very careful if you're choosing to do this game in first person mode. But I've sneak killed that guy during his recent animation, and now I'm going to be able to finish this guy off with a bottle. And that right there was very unfortunate. They can sometimes wobble randomly while they're running towards you in that very slow jog animation. But it doesn't matter, because I know I'll get more bottles back when I get to Union later on. And here is a corpse that has a couple of shotgun shells, and when I get up the ladder, I'm going to drop the walkway, and I'm going to head back into that room where the lockdown happened, and I'm just going to grab all the rest of the ammo, because there aren't any enemies, because I've despawned them. And just to make it easier on myself and to all you kind people who watch these videos, I'm just going to speed up the video to about 4 times speed once I drop the walkway, because all I'm doing is just picking up a bunch of ammo back in the previous area. So this is about 20 seconds of me just running back into this area, picking up all the ammo. It's the same case with the hysteric in this lockdown encounter, just to make it easier on myself and to make it easier on you people who watch the video. I just sped up the video because what am I even talking about at that point? It's practically the same case with the Centurion boss fight from Resident Evil 0, because all you're doing is just avoiding the boss and just shooting it. So simple. It's practically a gimmick fight. But fun fact, if you come back through this area and you go back to Liam's safe house when you're ready to confront Stefano, you will actually trigger a unique dialogue moment with Liam. And it's a bit of dark humor, because Sebastian will actually say the title of the game when he's talking to Liam by saying that there's evil within too, as a reference to the fact that Liam is constantly inside the safe house, and Liam being inside the safe house all the time eventually leads him to be corrupted by Theodore, and that was pretty interesting when I first heard it. And they awkwardly stare into the camera as well, which is even more hilarious. But this is a pretty interesting sequence. This is the very first time we're being put into a mandatory first-person section. It's the only time in the game where you're going to be in first person, so I'm glad that the developers didn't try to make it a standard, because if it was a standard, I'm sure it would have put a lot of people off from playing the game, and they just did it just as a way to diversify the gameplay, and it's a pretty interesting way of diversifying the gameplay. And it's not even that hard, because there's only 2 enemies. There's this enemy that I just killed, and then there's also a Lament. And you're only allowed to use stealth to your advantage. You cannot use your guns because of the flammable gas present. So this is practically an homage to Chapter 11 from the first Evil Within when you were traversing the Mannequin Factory, because the Mannequin Factory had flammable gas that prevented you from using all your guns and certain bolts from the Agony Crossbow. And considering that you could use the Harpoon Bolt in the Mannequin Factory, I'm honestly surprised that you can't use it here. The game is really strict in forcing you to use stealth to your advantage. And I like it, because this game is very stealth-focused. The stealth on this game is far more powerful than the combat. The combat is not as good as the first Evil Within, but the stealth is significantly better. And I think the game really benefits from the more stealth-oriented approaches, because it really makes you respect the survival horrorness of the game, and it really makes these encounters feel pretty intimidating when you're forced to use stealth. And they actually make it a standard for 2 of the boss fights on this game. The first boss fight where you're able to use stealth to completely bypass the boss fight is in Chapter 5, when you're fighting the Guardian for the first time. Because if you go around the side of City Hall, you can get to a door that, when you successfully break it open, you can completely skip the Guardian boss fight and save a lot of ammo because the Guardian takes a beating from weaponry. The second boss fight where stealth is a standard is in Chapter 11 when you're fighting Harbinger Liam, because you can actually kill Harbinger Liam using only stealth kills, and it takes 6 stealth kills to actually kill Liam. And that's actually the way the developers want you to kill him, because if you try fighting him with all of your weapons, he takes a beating. And if you haven't seen the kind of beating that Liam takes during that boss fight when you're using all your weapons, check out Seraphim17's channel, because for his walkthrough, he decided to use all the weapons just as a way of doing something different with that boss fight. And do not think that he did that because he didn't know stealth was the best way to deal with Liam. He was aware that stealth was the best way to deal with Liam. He just chose to do something different with that boss fight. But I've just killed the Lament, and now I'm going to be able to hit this panel over here. The code here is 124. That's the main code that seems to be the case with these panels. I mean, there are occasionally panels that require the code 24, and then there's only one panel that requires you to hit all of the buttons, and that's in Chapter 11, when you exit towards a safe house. But there are a couple of bottles, and there's also a pipe over here. I actually skipped it just then. It was all the way to the right in that corner. But I already had so many pipes as it is, so it really didn't matter in the long run. But once you've done that particular sequence, there aren't any enemies left to deal with in Chapter 4. The enemies will repopulate in this area of the Marrows if you decide to come back through here and visit Liam, or to explore the first area of Union again. But all we're doing right now is just traversing some walkways, picking up some additional ammo, going through a couple of vents, and then once we've done that, we're going to be able to interact with the computer that's at the end of this hallway, and we'll be able to gain access to the first safe house of the City Hall area of Union. And that will conclude Chapter 4. And since that's all that's left to do in Chapter 4, I'm just going to go off on a brief tangent. I have seen the first official PS5 gameplay from a particular game, where they have showcased the Unreal Engine 5, and I was very impressed by what they showed with the graphics side. The game looked really nice, and it looked better than real life, in all honesty. But that was mainly with the environment. The character that they were playing as when they were showcasing the tech demo for Unreal Engine 5, based on PS5 gameplay, the character just didn't look that impressive. The face just didn't have a lot of detail to it, and it just looked like a really plain face without any kind of subtle detail to it. And it's honestly surprising. You know, you'd think after Uncharted 4, which easily has the best facial details I've ever seen for a character, that they would go far beyond that, but they didn't. That's the one thing that really bugged me when they showcased the graphics of Unreal Engine 5, but I guess they weren't really focusing on the character details, they were mainly focusing on the environmental details. I just hope that in the PS5's life cycle, that if they can make games look as graphically appealing as what they showcased with that Unreal Engine 5 demo, that they can also increase the frame rate on so many games, because the frame rate on consoles is mostly 30 FPS, and I don't have a problem with 30 FPS, but I feel like in this day and age, we need to move past 30 FPS and onto 60 FPS, because 60 FPS is far more beneficial to gameplay, and it just makes the game look a little bit nicer. But I have heard rumors that with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for instance, it'll run at 30 FPS on the Xbox Series X. They haven't confirmed what the frame rate will be on PS5, but if that is really the case, that's kind of disappointing. But maybe they can make up for it if they can somehow use the graphics in a way that benefits the gameplay. That'll be very interesting to see. But that is the end of Chapter 4. Stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.